This is the work session that I had asked everybody to attend, so this is not a meeting. There will be no action tonight, just merely discussion, some things I have got on my mind. And so, again, whether we spend a half hour here tonight or longer, goodness, I'm fine with that. There's nothing in front of you tonight that we're going over. I do have some data there that, goodness, you take home and look. I'll certainly supply the press with their copy later, but purposely that's not for tonight. So don't concern yourselves with the binders. There's nothing there. So just some historical data and some things that Mr. Crane had asked for that I thought everybody should see and be helpful at some point. So anyways, let's just jump in. We have got some guests with us that I thought could lend some conversation, some ideas, some thoughts. And again, the idea is to maybe clarify some things. There is beginning to be some misnomers. And goodness, that's not appropriate. We want to make sure everybody understands how things flow, no pun intended, but how things flow with the utility. Maybe some historical data, some points of interest in how we did, what we did, and things of that nature. And because nothing is systematic as happening overnight. You know, there's a lot of things that, you know, we have to do over time. We do methodically and do a lot of research to get where we're at. So before I jump in with some of mine, please, I'll introduce some of the folks I asked to share in some conversation. Courtney, if you'll lead us down the bench.
Hi, I'm Courtney Holiday with Baker Tilly.
Andre Riley, partner with Baker Tilly.
Bo Zeller, partner with Frost Brown Todd Attorneys.
Justin Green, Mayor.
Sally Hadabo, City Clerk Treasurer.
Monty Dunn, Westler Engineering.
Nathan Club, Dave O'Mara Contractor.
Please, for our audience, Mr. Jones, would you start?
Warner Jones, Board of Works. Dan Linke, Board of Works, and also Salem City District 1 Councilman.
Dylan Ward, Salem City District 2.
Steve Crane, District 3.
Randy Lee, District 4.
Roger Payton, at large.
Thank you all. Appreciate y'all being here, and that says a lot, and your willingness to sit and listen, and goodness, maybe navigate a few things, and just have a conversation. Again, there's no set agenda here. This is just me having some ideas. I'm going to ramble probably more than anything, so forgive me. I'll apologize in advance. Sally often says, get to the point, and so I'll try to do that. She keeps me in check more often than not. So council, let's just dive in. So, you know, I thought different ways of looking at this, and I thought maybe we should just go through some ideas in my mind on protocol, procedure, and governance from a regulatory standpoint. And you know, there's been some conversation of, you know, well the task force is going to find X, or the task force should go look for Y, and that's fine. Goodness, that data is still very readily available and can be found. But I want to make sure everybody understands, you know, the governance comes from the state. When you have a utility such as a waterworks department, and the fact that very little is done, if any is done, without items governance. The governance comes through a issued permit, and you know that permit is held by the mayor, the sitting mayor. Mrs. Chastain well knows that. You know, the sitting mayor holds the permit to the city water operating, not the Board of Works, not the council, not the clerk treasurer. The permittee is the mayor, and so under that governance and level of how IDEM manages and monitors and works, you know, it's their purview to say, this is how your plant, this is how your distribution, this is how it's going to work, this is how it's going to run. And so they have that prerogative under Indiana code, and that's with any water utility serving final water. And so East Washington, Town of New Pekin, you know, they all have similar permits, and that's how they follow those procedures. And, you know, IDEM makes a lot of visits You have probably saw their vehicles in town. There's a lot of divisions of IDEM. You know, there's the air quality control. There's the soil and erosion control. There's just several facets of IDEM and how they work, and quite a large agency. And some of you guys have probably all had other dealings and can tell that, you know, that's a large facet of state government. Indiana Department of Environmental Management, pardon me, the acronym IDEM, Indiana Department of Environmental Management, they do a lot. And so some of their things overlap DNR, some of them don't. Some of them overlap other state agencies, but they have several specific missions. And I can tell you, you know, within their department, I know a lot of them by first name. A lot of them have called me. A lot of them have been here. They go to the plant. They go to the distribution points. That they know the mapping. They know our assets, our capabilities, storage. You know, they have all that data, and so, you know, they're the ones that continually monitor us. So that's an important key thing. I want everybody to know that, you know, from a regulatory standpoint, these are state laws that say, okay, you're going to operate within these parameters based on your operation. And the interesting thing is, no two facilities are alike. And I think two of our panelists, Monty and Nathan, you can attest to that too. In the construction world, you got a plant here, but the plant down the road can be apples and oranges. Mm-hmm. They don't necessarily work the same in their production. They don't necessarily store it the same in capacity, and they don't necessarily distribute it the same. And so utilities are a bit like puzzle pieces. You can't say, well, we're going to do what Brownstown does. Well, you might do X part of what Brownstown does, but not all of it. Is that an accurate?
No, it is. It's based on the hydraulics, the age, the type of equipment, the water quality of each system, surface water versus groundwater. I mean, there's multiple players that factor into, for each specific plant, how they're graded and how they're expected to run per IDEM. Yes.
And in the construction world, you know, you bid on jobs. There's not a standard blueprint. You see a lot of variations, don't you not?
Yeah.
Do you not?
Some towns, you know, prefer a STR 21 pipe, some prefer C900, some prefer ductile iron. It's all by price and more bang for your buck.
And those are all approved pipes.
Yeah.
Regardless of what goes in the ground, those are approved.
Yeah.
You know, and so, I guess my point of that is, so they document all this. So, you know, that person at IDEM, they pulled the file of Salem. They know they've talked to this person on Monday. This fix was done on Tuesday. You know, all that's documented up there. And so, being a large agency, certainly sometimes you have to call 3 or 4 times to get the right department, right field inspector. Who knows? But it's all there. And I just want to make sure that's understood. That, you know, we have a heavy hand in how we operate. And has there been a few errors? Now that I won't shy away from. Judy would tell you the same. It is a very tight parameter. There's various reasons, one being surface water versus groundwater. And I'll get that into a minute, but there's very tight parameters because it's science. Between the testing and the organics and the compounds, and I suppose, Monty, you're probably the best to ask that there is this true science from production to distribution.
Well, yes, there is. There's definitely science. It's 2 aspects of it. Your plant is dealing with treating the conditions of the water that's either coming out of your well or coming out of the local reservoir. On the distribution side of it, your science is keeping certain chemicals, chlorine being the big one, at sufficient levels throughout your system to provide what EPA considers Safe Water Drinking Act limits. But also, not only that, you in the collection system or distribution system, you also have the piece of cross connections so that you do not have contaminations coming from an outside source into it. You can have every leak, every main break, certain number of years. If you go too long without hydrant flushing, you're going to get chemicals, iron, manganese, et cetera, built up in your mains. That's going to cause water quality issues, can cause a whole host of issues. But so yes, it's all science, just a little bit of two different pieces based on whether you're treating the water or you're keeping it acceptable throughout your whole system to our customers.
And you know, so moving forward, you know, they look at, okay, how does Salem operate? They review that. They bless it. We go on. Certainly there are changes to that. And so, you know, what worked in this particular example may not work the same tomorrow. If we change, for example, the way the old plant pumped water, filtered water versus what the new plant did in 2020, those are some significant changes. And so IDEM then monitors that, watches it, records it. And so they take note. Okay, Salem used to do 3 bottles of chemical X. Now they need only 2 bottles of chemicals X because this plant is so much more efficient, you know, so they notate that. And so all that's taken into consideration. And so when they're there and they look, and then the employees, you know, of course, it merits the note of those are all certified water employees. So they have their credentials. Sally nor myself can go and fill in. You know, those are requirements again by IDEM. You have to have that certification because of the size of our plant. You know, it is a 24-hour a day, 7-day a week. It is not permitted to allow it to pump without a certified operator. So they set that is part of our permit and how the facility works. So it is manned, womaned, stationed, pardon me. It is occupied 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And we've got some very good water pumpers that have really proven themselves. And those licenses can then be extended. There's a minimum requirement, and some of them have actually went and got a few extra credentials. So I applaud those city employees for doing that. And as far as, you know, then locally, you know, and just to make another point of reference, you know, Indiana code does dictate when a municipality adopts and has a utility that the Board of Works is the oversight. And so Mr. Jones, Mr. Lipke are the two now. We've had several Board of Works members in the past, but they are the two sitting Board of Works members with myself as Indiana code dictates. So appreciate those two guys jumping in on that because that's an extra duty they didn't ask for. Surface water and groundwater. That's always been an interesting topic. Folks say, well, you know, we've got all this water, we've got all this volume of lake out there, and I'm out on my boat. Man, that is crystal clear. I don't understand why you say it takes money to treat that water in production. And because we have a surface lake, so it is filled then with organic material, and it's just as simple as that. That organic material can be plant life, it can be animal life. It is certainly occurring at a microscopic level, and that water is just that. That is being filtered in from the intake, pulled, and it travels a significant amount of distance. The plant, it does not sit on the water, and even I've had folks didn't realize that. There is what, gosh, guys, almost a mile.
I'd say 2 miles.
Pardon me, it is a little longer. There's almost 2 miles between the treatment plant and where it pulls in. Those intakes are quite massive. They draw it, and so that raw water, and that's what it is, it's raw water. And it leaves, it travels a significant amount of distance before it hits the clarifiers. And groundwater, so your rivers, your aquifers, what else would be an example of groundwater?
Groundwater is strictly wells.
And
Rivers
wells.
would even be surface water. River is
Pardon me.
surface.
Okay. And so those, as it says, you know, from the ground, those purify in a different way. The rocks, the minerals, gravity through the earth, you know, pulls down as the water trickles up. Filters in a whole different way, and it's a lot easier to treat. So that those thresholds of what your final product has to be. If we were doing a groundwater application, oh gosh, we wouldn't have near the cost moving forward. And I think you have some clients, Bo, that are groundwater.
Yes, several.
Okay.
Several down closer to the river, a lot of wells down there. But there's a lot of surface water up here.
Yeah, just the nature of our topography and how the lakes are formed and they move on. But, we've got, like I said, such a large body of water. And another thing I want to remind folks, the value of what we've got out there in Lake John Hay. Truck, Danny knows this, Dylan, I've told several times, Steve remembers, and gosh, Roger remembers the firehouse. So Randy, I know you heard about it and probably do, but raising the lake nearly 4 feet was a huge, huge project that who would believe it would have kicked in and done what it did. And that decision was a partnership with East Washington Rural Water. Gosh, we started talking about that. Hart Judy, gosh, maybe even prior to 07. Okay. And so, what would it take to raise Lake John Hay? And, it's such a massive over-engineered dam. You've been on it. It's a monster of an earthen dam. And, a lot of folks went out there, a lot of experts say, how? And that become a federal issue because of permitting. And then that's one of those government red tapes. It took years. After that, we were close to 2015, 2016, I believe, Truck. That sound right? 2015 for sure. When we finally got the permit out of Texas, East Washington Rural Water and City of Salem, it's a joint app. The East Washington was the lead applicant. Here's the irony, and I say this with all due respect. It was because nobody could figure out the fail point. They wouldn't stamp off on, you'd appreciate it. They couldn't stamp approved because they couldn't figure out the fail point on Lake John Hay. It was so over-engineered. How do we make this extension work? How does it fit? And so Banning Engineering was the firm that was hired to design it. And everybody in Texas, which was a department of federal government, said, we don't know. And so in a Hail Mary attempt, quite frankly, East Washington asked their engineer, can we just do something that they know? And so and I want to butcher the term, it was basically an articulating concrete fabric that came over the dam itself and allowed a natural spillway through these accordion style concrete mesh. And is that an accurate depiction? Yeah. And so take that off the table. So will you approve a 3.75 foot concrete wall? Hey, we like those. And so we got the dam extension approved, built. That poured cubic feet. That poured the equivalent of Lake Salem into Lake John Hay. So DNR computed that and said, okay, you, City of Salem, East Washington, you single-handedly added a year's supply of water to your network. So those back-to-back drought years that had the intakes exposed, and they were. Any of you got out on a boat, those intakes, we gave ourselves a year's supply of water by doing that. And again, huge thanks to East Washington because they funded it. They were the lead applicant. But they knew that they had a vested interest in our water system, and they did it. Huge amount of water. And so consequently, anybody that went out there saw real quick, okay, now our road is underwater. The nests where the bluegill used to go aren't there. It changed the dynamics of the lake very quick, and in a good way, in a very good way. So it worked. We got that volume of water. So we had a lot of security in knowing it. And I say that, I know it's old news, but as far as longevity and planning, that was a big move. And access to water, access to that style of water. And by the way, DNR, this merits bringing it to DNR, monitored that lake for several years with some I don't know if it was sonar, I don't know, goodness, I wasn't out there with them to watch them do it. But they were able to read the bottom of the lake, and they did the entire structure at Lake John Hank. And I'm going to tell you it wrong, so it was either 12 or 13. Pardon me for not having that in front of me, but they identified, let's say it's 12 underground springs in that body of water. And they said, my gosh, remember that, Judy? Okay. That is an amazing body of water, the way it sets and the way our forefathers thought putting that dam where they did in that valley. It is fed with a very good constant supply of water. So you couple up the raising of the dam and the volume of that springs, 12 of them kicking in, it made sense to make some real investments out there, and that's what happened. And so it's become a very big asset, and I do mean big asset, because we should protect it and know that it's serving a lot of folks, a whole lot of folks. But I want to bring that back up in history. Those were things that needed to be done, and they did. We've got that volume of water. And so I said that, and Monty mentioned it, the surface water, those naturally occurring elements, they're all there. And so we're seeing a lot of cost increases. Monty, just rattle us off some names. I'm drawing a blank. They're such scientific names. What are some of the chemicals we buy?
Well, you got your polymers, you've got your chloroforms, you've got your chlorines, you've got sodium permanganates, sodium biosulfates, chlorides. I mean, there's 10 probably used out there at the plant.
Yeah. And it is, you remember?
Could I just say something
Sure.
about water? I know that every administration comes in and think that old administration didn't do a thing. It was constant. It's constant to keep up the plants, the water, and just think, how do people like myself, how do I use it? What could I do without it? Absolutely not. This town is full of old pipes, and they leak. Other groundwater comes into it after it's been treated.
Yeah.
We really need to be on top of this, because when I first come in as mayor, I wanted to see how the water got to our plant from Lake John Hay. And they took me down a trail. I was scared to death. They took me on the ridge to go down, and that's where the pipe was located. And I said, if this pipe would leak, this whole hill would go down into another valley. And I said, how would we ever get it? So the first thing I did, or tried to do, is take that water, and I said, where's the flattest ground up here? And so they took me to a field where all kinds of turkeys was there. I said, oh my gosh. I said, why doesn't that pipe come up to this hill and then come into our plant? It's perfect. So I don't know whether I got a grant or whether we used our own people or if we had enough money to do it. I don't have my records in front of me, and I can't remember that far back. But we brought the pipe that fed the plant up and onto flat ground. And then it went on. And I couldn't show it to you because I don't remember. I'd get lost if I go out there.
We'll go
You
after.
all probably know where that pipe is.
We'll go after dark.
We'll shoot some turkeys.
And I'd be
It's constant repair.
I'd be remiss with not including Judy. She's spot on, we owe her. We owe all the mayors. That is a chore, and it is a constant daily chore. And she's exactly right. And
another example I can tell you that I was clerk treasurer, so the water department guys would come in. First, they would tell me things that I probably shouldn't know, or maybe the old administration knew. But they would say, if you could get through the crack of the old Lake Salem Dam, if we could get through there, we could stand up because the earthen dam inside that had washed out. And so I had just got appointed as mayor, and I was at a meeting, a call meeting at French Lick, and my husband was with me. And I said, please don't let it's raining really hard, please don't let the dam burst on my watch until I can get it done. I got a call, dam burst. First, I didn't know what to do. I had to leave the meeting. I called the governor, and he flew down and met me out there and said, we'll get federal funds to fix it. But we needed that dam too, because Lake John Hay was well, it wasn't pumping as much as our Lake Salinda.
Right.
And when I drained that thing to Lake Salinda, oh my, bears get all kinds of blame. All kinds. They said it would never hold water again, you know, the people started talking how bad it would be, and gave me all kinds of, you know what.
I understand, I do.
But we got a nice dam. I mean, we had engineers that helped decide what kind was needed there.
Yeah.
So it's a struggle, and I know that you all are trying to do your best.
Well, thank you for those, and I may look at you here in a few minutes for another comment. And so, you know, we've done all this, and we've talked about now. I want to say there's also a misnomer about plant production and water distribution. Judy's point, you know, when we start getting the blames, well, the water's no good. No, that's not fair. That's not true. Well, the water plant's not working. No, that's not true. You don't understand what we're trying to say here. And there is two distinct facets of the utility when it talks about raw to final in your home or your business. There's two completely different facets. That production takes place basically within the confines of that property of the plant. And so when it leaves, there are three, not booster pumps, the three, what am I trying to say?
I don't know what you're trying to say.
Oh, the big high powerful pumps.
The high service pumps?
There's three high service pumps. Big word. You know, those three high service pumps, once it leaves those high service pumps, it is now distribution. It is no longer part of the production. And I want to make a few minutes here to talk about that, and these guys can share in and chime in. So distribution is pipe. Distribution is getting it to your home. And so there's so many things that are variables then between production and distribution. One of the stops, becomes storage. You know, we've got 5 tanks in our inventory. We've got a total of 5. So you've got tank storage, and there's an element of interest there because tanks change with the temperature and the climate. So on cold days, they'll frost. If it's warm, and vice versa, they'll condensate and sweat. And so we figured out, 7-8 years ago, we were having separation in the tanks and towers, and depending on how they pulled, we were having some stale pockets within the tanks. Did some research, and maybe you guys have installed some. We did mixers. We've got mixers in all those tanks, and boy, what a difference that made. So you constantly got, it's like an agitator in a washing machine. You constantly got that stirring that is no longer pocketed to where you're pulling off the top and leaving the bottom, or siloed in the middle. And those mixers made a huge difference. Mr. Jones knows all about that. He was very vocal in helping getting that done. And so that changed. But there's an example of how, that water changed from the plant to that tower. Just as simple as the science behind the change of temperature and how that stagnant water looked in them tanks. But it made a difference. And so, we've got a grid system. I want to talk about that for a second. This grid system, or a loop, if you will, the way it was designed, and Judy, just say yes, no, or you don't remember. But, before Mayor Chastain, goodness, we're going back to the 50s, late 40s. Salem grew in such a way, we added here and then we'd add here. And there wasn't a true blueprint on how the system ought to work. And so, because now we're adding on this subdivision or these 3 streets, oh gosh, by the way, now this has got a dead end. The grid or the loop is not always conducive to helping flow. And we've run into some dead ends. And matter of fact, we know about 7, 8 lines that, that they're boogers. They do not get enough use and they're boogers. And so even flushing, even routine everyday flushing won't get that out. And so they don't have enough hydrant capability, or they're in such a way they're too much private property. Now we've rectified several of them. I will tell you, we've gotten better. We had about 10 or 12 and we're down. We're whittling those issues away, but because of the way the grid works or the loop, there wasn't enough valves put in. So now we face, so let's say we have a major leak. We're having a hard time isolating an area. These 2 blocks over here may run low on pressure because we've got a 10-inch, 8-inch by chance, 6 for sure, that's ruptured, and we have a hard time isolating that to fix just that repair. And so instead of isolating it and sending that water around, letting the crew fix that, then we have several people that have a water issue for, hour, 2 hours, goodness, however long it takes the crew to get in there, and depending on if it's a clamp or it's a section of pipe that has to be replaced. And, those happen at the most inopportune times.
Okay, I live very close to the water tank. You would think I would have the greatest pressure there is. And my neighbors around us also have had this problem. I didn't address it at the time. I should have, but I felt like that was favoritism to me. I wish some other mayor would have looked at this. So what I have to do, or what we have to do, is we have to put I don't know what's called, maybe y'all can help me, a motor to pump.
Booster pump.
A booster pump and the water meter to get water in my house to rinse the shampoo out of my hair.
What Judy's referring to, and it's an interesting problem. We've got it in 2 sections of town. Up on Jackson, where she and several of her neighbors, and over on Webb and Aspen Drive, it's elevation, and it's crazy. Dylan can chime in here. Him and his wife have asked, hey, I can see the tower. What are you talking about? I can see the tower. But when you have a tower that is level and there's a valley between you, it becomes a gravity issue.
It's head pressure.
Head pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've had several customers that have had to do boosters. We have added some. Judy, Mayor Sense, and myself, we've tried to figure out what makes the most sense. And now that's 2 sides to that. And you guys can help me here. You can't always put a booster in. You run the risk of then another problem.
Well, you have 2 options in that situation, one much cheaper than the other. Option number 1 is raise the tank. That's quite pricey. Option number 2 is boosters. The thing you have to watch on boosters is how all of your distribution lines are interconnected. So let's say the neighborhood where she's at, if I have a booster pump sitting here and her neighborhood is that telephone, there might be a line 2 blocks down the road tied to that goes over here that's at a lower elevation. If I put this booster on, I'm going to supply her, but I'm going to blow these guys' fixtures up. So you got to be mindful of every connection, and in those you have to install PRVs, pressure reducing valves, to not let the pressure go too high on those while you're trying to boost it there. So there is a science, the whole hydraulic model you have to look at to properly fix that and fix an issue versus creating 2 more.
My house is old and we've got old pipes.
Yeah.
So it could do damage in my home.
Mm-hmm.
Plus your neighbors, plus down the street.
Exactly.
Steve.
Speaking of the storage tanks, on the table of contents on page 11, water storage tanks 22.4, it talks about the city is developing a valve operating schedule to determine the extent of the pressure zones. How What, is there a timeline for that, or how, is that ongoing, or?
Okay, that's something different. So
Okay.
that's completely different. A valve exercise program is the valves we know about. And so, yes, what that's trying to say is, if we have a crew out, is this valve properly working? And what are they? Some of them called gate valves.
All of them in your system here are gate valves. Your butterfly valves are large diameter. You
Don't have it. So is that gate valve working? And we have several of them have failed. And so that only adds to the problem. That valve is basically useless until we dig it up and repair it. And so what that's trying to say there, again, that's other information. That's saying, yes, we want to know what's working and identify them. And that's part of our asset mapping that I've been talking about. Yes, we've been diligently testing. I can't give you the number of valves. Do you recall off the top of your head?
Approximately 1,900 valves. One thing I will say on the valve subject, it kind of catches both of them. He mentioned pressure zones. Yes, every distribution system has different pressure zones. A lot of those you have to keep isolated to keep what she just talked about from happening. If you connect these two pressure zones and you're bleeding pressure off to over here, then she's not going to have enough. So there's a valve that keeps those isolated. So identifying those and which valve should stay open and which valve should stay closed, yes, that is a valid thing to know. The other piece that I will go as far as valve maintenance, there's two pieces to valve maintenance. Number one, which he can attest to this by doing it every day, is when you have a main break or a leak of some sort, the valve needs to work to be able to isolate that to as small of an area as possible that's out of water while it's being fixed. If you had a proper operating valve and you had a main break out here on Main Street, you might be able to isolate it to one block is out of water. If your valves are not working, that might grow up to 10, 12, I've seen it, 20, 30 blocks that's out because valves don't work. The other piece to that is liability. And what I mean by that is, and this is back to the IDEM, and I've witnessed this firsthand before. A system, when it comes to your hydrants and your valves, let's say you have a main break that you cannot get shut down for an hour because valves didn't work. During that hour, a customer's basement floods and they have $50,000 worth of damage. When they turn it into their insurance company, the insurance companies, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to get with the municipality or the utility owner, and they're going to get with IDEM and say, where's your records of the last time you maintained this equipment? If it's broke, how long have you known it was broke and you didn't fix it? And if you do not have your maintenance records, or if they run across something that, hey, we were told in 2002 this valve was broke, but we never fixed it, you are 100% on the hook for every dime of that damage. So that's the two pieces that are very critical: reliability of service to your customers and reduction of liability for the items not working. So that's just to expand a little bit on the valve question.
And so, Steve, as we move forward with every project, whether it be Highway 56 that NDOT finally got their punch list done and moved off of, when we had the utility conflict with water and wastewater, that was another thing. So we added valves. That whole corridor was re-engineered, and okay, where does another valve need to be? Where does it need to be on this side or that? It was completely redone, and so that whole corridor was part of that in that conflict. And so the CCMG projects, the Community Crossing Matching Grant, when we move water lines, and so proud to say, to your point in question there, every time we touch dirt, we've been very aggressive in that. We're going to put those in. We're going to, and then obviously know where they're at. And so that's soon to go into a GIS system. And so every one of those valves, good new valves, of course, but then as we move on with the GIS, the mapping, and then notify on our data screen a valve that's problematic, or that, hey, we need to call a contractor. There's two valves on South Main. We need to get somebody in there, and that's on a punch list for us, a priority for us. But we're putting in new valves every chance we can. Makes a big difference to Monty's point about isolation and trying to fix those repairs. Hopefully, in those new sections, that's a misnomer. You can still have a problem in a new section, so you want new valves. You certainly want new valves. And another thing I want to move on. Talking about total consumers, we have a responsibility. Board of Works, me as the permittee, there's a lot of things that are just outside the 72, 68, whichever number you want to go off the census, residents here in the city. All said, it's 18-some thousand end users. And so because of our wholesale contracts, that's my argument. That would be Judy's argument. That would be the other mayor's argument. That lake is far more serving than just the city of Salem. It has got a gross number of end users. And those are a lot of folks who, again, rely on the production, rely on the distribution, and to their final, their place of business or their home. Almost 18,000, actually a little over 18,000. Talked about the asset mapping. We're getting ready to do another one, Monty, a water loss audit. Those are due, every
Other August, every 2 years.
every 2 years in August. And so we've been doing those water loss audits, and they provide some interesting information. And it's just what it sounds like, a water loss audit. So are we matching up, just as it sounds, are we matching up production gallons to what our meters are telling? And so, no. Judy knows that. No. Production and what the meters say often are two different numbers. There's some reasoning and understanding. If you have a bad winter, you have a lot of folks who have come accustomed to letting their water run. You can have a large amount of consumption that doesn't make sense. Okay, well, that's not really a water loss then. It actually went through the meter. If you have a bad winter where we have a lot of breaks and ruptures, okay, that was never metered water. Now we got to figure out, okay, was it this leak particularly? Was it the month of January where we had 10 leaks? Do we have old hydrants? Gosh, Roger can attest. Some of them hydrants, the stems, you may not see it. You can be standing there until you put your finger on it. You don't even necessarily know it's leaking. The way it comes down the stem some days, or it can be leaking underground. A valve can obviously come up. You've been driving down the road and you'll see a little circle of water. Guys, that's what it is. Some valves leaking coming up. It'll travel up that pipe about 4 foot. We've had several of those. So, water loss is something, and that was an IDEA mandate, was it not? We had to start.
Water loss audits it's a federal mandate.
Pardon me, federal. That's federal. Misspoke. And so knowing where's your water going? And do you guys remember there in Corden? Was it, 2 months ago? Or was it right at Christmas? I can't remember. The big leak in Corden that they couldn't find.
3 days.
It was a Christmas, but about 3 days, wasn't it?
3 days town without water.
Corden went out, and they had an idea. If you recall the news, they had triangulated it to a part of town, but wasn't for sure. Nathan, 3 days. What had happened? It was pipe laying on rock. They finally determined not only was it pipe on rock, it had been filled, and so they had took was it a 10-foot, 12-foot swale and had dressed it up in such a way that water never come top ground and was never coming top ground. And so with some sonar technology, and we've used it here at Salem, it's pretty slick technology. They finally figured out what it was doing, and it was going straight down. It was on some bedrock under that fill. You talk about a water loss audit. Now it obviously happened quick. Most likely it had started leaking, but it wasn't enough to trigger some things. But those are the reasons you do that. And so we monitor that all the time. And those water loss audits sometimes are eye openers. Monty, didn't we have the last one, that particular August, showing about a 27%?
29.7.
And so, what did that mean? And so we made some corrective measures. We got some extra ears to the valves, the hydrants. And we did, what did we find? About 8 leaks,
8 to 10, yeah.
8 to 10.
One sizable one.
And one of them was sizable. Again, they weren't coming to the ground. They weren't running through the road. They weren't causing a basement to flood. And those were important things. We did. We tackled it very quickly. And we, gosh, guys, what do we run? Most months, 7 to 12% now. And from that position, we really bettered our water loss. I don't profess to ever say it'll be 0%. That's probably an impossible number. We've got, gosh, 82 miles of pipe.
Well, the reason why it'll never be 0 is your lowest in the years past when I was in the business, did a lot of research and reading studies, and the consensus is 3 to 5% probably as low as you're going to get, just due to fire hydrants, etc., that are normal things that's going to use water that are not metered. You're never going to get it to 0, but so 5% max is about as low as you're going to get it.
And again, 80, I can't remember, it's 87, 88 miles. The way the distribution lays, we've got quite a coverage, and that coverage is outside the city limits. As obviously, when you're talking coming from Lake John Hay into the city limits, there's a lot of miles of pipe, a lot of miles. Okay. Asset mapping, water loss, those are all things we're doing. And that asset mapping is very interesting. And that's something Westler's helped us with, Baker Tilly's helped us with, valuing those assets and knowing what we've got. And that's towers, valves, hydrants. I can tell you that the tanks and towers are worth a lot of money. That has been one of those shocking points. Judy could build a tank and elevated tank or a true tower for pennies in those years of what steel and the construction cost and permitting is now. It is unbelievable what that has changed and the necessity of keeping those and what they do for us. And here's another piece of nugget, a little nugget. We have 24 hours of storage, and that's a good comfort. I'm not saying great comfort. It's a good comfort. If there was another adverse, whatever catastrophe in the world, we have 24 hours of storage between the 5 tanks. And so East Washington has their, I don't know, 4, 6 tanks. I lose track of how many they have. New Pekin has their storage. And so everybody has their part in that. But those tanks, we realized we needed to look at the value on the insurance as well. We were not fully insured there to what today's steel and materials cost. So we did bump the value on our schedule. You're looking anywhere from, you probably saw some numbers. Last I saw, a medium-sized tank, you're $5 million to just start talking, 7 to 8 million to do a proper tank. You're 10 to 12 million if you want some decent volume. And then time, that's not a quick process. You don't build a tank overnight.
It's a year, solid year and a half, 2 years.
Yeah. So it's very important we monitor those and keep them up. And we do have a maintenance contract that we entered into. Gosh, guys, you would remember with Suez, what?
2017.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Sally. 2017, Suez is a national company that's their forte. They go around and they inspect, they value, look at weak spots, and we did. I will tell you, this isn't a scare tactic, no way, shape, or form. They found a weak spot in the standpipe, and a crucial piece of the distribution system, the way that standpipe works, and what Judy's explaining, and to Dylan's house, that standpipe is the highest elevation, and if that standpipe would have had failure, ay caramba, it would have been a disastrous repair and a lengthy repair. And they did, that they drained it. I don't remember, 3/4 away, if not a little further, and were able to do repairs inside. Actually added steel plates, added the extra protection that it needed. And then, you know, it was an eye opener to us. You know, we've got to keep doing this, and that maintenance contract is so important. You know, that piece, that tank alone is key. It really is kind of the heartbeat, if you will, as the trunk lines come into Salem. That standpipe really sends it out. And so we found that, and kudos to all of us who entered into that contract. I'm so glad we did. And Sally, it's an annual contract. Not cheap.
No.
It's not cheap at all. But the council and the board of works said, my gosh, what's the alternative? And failure or rupture is not an option. And so we do. We pay that maintenance contract, and we've been very proactive. That's only going to get more expensive, and those things are in place. And so Suez and what they do, they rotate tanks. Last year was what we call the Tecumseh tank behind the Chinese restaurant. So part of that maintenance contract is a all-encompassing. You know, they come in, they inventory what it needs, what it doesn't have. They go off of the OSHA requirements, IDEM requirements, lead paint. I mean, they check the whole system. And so they'll go in and make the repairs, then they'll tint, they'll do the sandblasting, take the lead paint off. They'll go in and make all the true repairs of steel, ladders, safety, the whole gamut before they start painting. Judy?
Other mayors before us had to go get scuba divers to go in to the tanks also. And what they did, I wasn't involved in it, so I'm not sure, but that's how they check the tanks inside.
Yeah. Now they use cameras, but yes.
Okay, but it was,
Yes.
I remember it. I thought that was really amazing that we had to do stuff like that.
Well,
I wasn't there at the time.
You're right. It almost sounds voodoo science, but you're right. That's how it had to be.
Okay.
And yeah.
They used scuba divers the first time they came here.
Well, they used them in the reservoir. Yeah. So to your point, not that long ago, they actually put a diver in Reservoir Hill. They sure did. Pardon me, those who don't, Reservoir Hill is the concrete bunker. It sits right beside the standpipe. So we have two tanks, two storage, if you will, on the same property. But yeah, the 2017, 2018, I don't know, 2019 by chance. But yeah, we still had a scuba diver in the reservoir. Sure did. And I guess, Judy, because it's so dark and maybe the cameras weren't going to quite pick everything they thought. I don't know why they went ahead.
Should they make repairs? I mean, it seems like they made repairs.
They do.
While they were in it.
It's that flowable fill that is an epoxy style that can cure with the moisture.
Yeah.
Now they do lower the level, but yeah, it's not bone dry by no means. Not at all. Okay, so that gives you some idea on some asset mapping. We're doing all that. We have done all that, and it's ongoing. It certainly is ongoing. But I want to bring up those towers because that is a huge asset, and we've got to protect them. Excuse me. Moving on. Something else in that asset mapping, it's not just the water utility, and I want to just slightly touch on that. We look at everything in the water, wastewater, stormwater avenue, and those discussions can be multifaceted because you handle that utility. There's a lot of moving water, a lot of pipes, and so it's not just the water utility that is being looked at and reviewed. Stormwater is a big issue. Sanitary sewer is your wastewater. It's all pipes. It's all flowing. It's all going somewhere. So speaking of pipes, I do want to speak on discoloration for a moment. That's another misnomer. Nobody wants it. Nobody likes it. Nobody wants to deal with it. And myself, no mayor, but it's nothing new. And We did have some examples in the last few years, 2023 being a huge one. And so, but discoloration is not the same as dirty water. And that's a ping pong thing that gets out of hand. Manganese, iron, naturally occurring organics, gentlemen, as they sit in a pipe, they decay and become tan, brown, orange, even slight red. And so, again, not a production. If you want to start saying, well, why do we have discoloration? It can if a filter's not working, but as of late, our issue that we found was definitely in distribution. And so distribution meaning we had pockets, and I use that word pockets of water that gave us extreme problems. And so go back in time, go back in history a little bit. 2010 was a pivotal year for the water utility. Plus or minus 2010 is when some of these decisions were being made. Danny, truck. We had a horrible taste and odor issue that was plaguing the system. And hey, everybody that lives here knows it. You know, that was a serious problem. Mayor Bauer was beating his head against the wall. It was a lot of engineers, a lot of IDEMs, a lot of folks who, what do? We cannot get the plant to take the organics out the way we want it to. And this was a production issue as it come out. And long story short, I won't get into the science or the engineering. I didn't sign off on it. But the concept was, can we do a post-production treatment, post-chlorine production? And it was an interesting concept. IDEM had not really thought that would work. IDEM says, well, you know, your pre-chlorination's not, we're not getting the results we want. Let's try post-chlorination. Second line was laid. There is a parallel line still in the ground today. There's parallel lines that left the plant. And so post-chlorination was a concept that was sent into motion. And so that post-chlorination was supposed to then make that extra line a loop. And so it would give it about a mile travel time and react. And then as it come out of that loop, it would hit the trunk line and start its journey to town. Hey, it worked. It worked. Kudos to all those folks, even though it was quite a journey to get there. It worked. And so as that system was there and it laid, that's one of those things over time, forget about what's underground. We all do. You know, if it's not broke, if it's not exposed, if it's not doing something adverse, it's still doing its job. It's still in effect. So as you all know, goodness, and not shying away from it, as you all know, we had some discoloration that in 21 and 22, start of 23, and it really become, there's no reason for it. It would start in a certain spot, and it didn't make any sense, and then we'd flush, and then it'd be gone, and then, wait a minute, 3 weeks, there it was again. Why is this happening? And then it would be gone, and we wouldn't have it for months. We'd have it for months. As far as a prevalent issue. Oh, certainly a stale line. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying as a prevalent issue, it was gone. And so, as you all know, fall of 23, that reared its head, and it reared it in a violent force. And I've said it many times in many meetings, but I'll just share again. What finally come of that was the size, the circumference. Monty, one was a 16-inch line, and the other was 12. Somehow, somewhere, science changed, production changed. We had a new plant. We had a lot of variables. Long story short, the line was no longer working in a loop, and it trapped. So you've got a mile, darn near a mile of trapped water. How many times have you seen a mile of trapped water? Never. Well, I shouldn't say never.
City block, a block or 2 blocks, 3 blocks,
Sure.
but not a mile, and that's gonna stagnate.
It stagnated something fierce. And when it finally ebbed its last time, the flow took over. And that last burst, push, whatever you want to call it, completely saturated distribution system after that point. And so it went gangbusters. Long story short, yes, we had an awful time ridding ourselves of that after it belched. That's in essence what it did. Chased it, scour flush, chased it, isolated valves. It was a nightmare. Nobody wants to relive that, myself included. So that repair was made. That repair was fixed. That line is dead. There's no way water can ever get in it again. That solved a lot of problems. A lot of head scratching went away. A lot of riddles got solved. There was just some things that were happening in that northern quadrant that just didn't make sense. And boy, so something good, something really good, and it was a good fix, ended up not working long term. And so that's an important piece of that. I want to reiterate that was fixed. That's no longer the issue. That's no longer. And so certainly we're back in flushing season here, getting ready to start. I'll never say we're rid of it. That would be, pardon me, I'll never say we're rid of any discoloration. That would be an improper thing for any elected official to say. That is, how many utilities, municipal owned or private owned? That's why you flush. That's why you let that pocket out or that underutilized line. You let it breathe. You let it filter. You let it get it out. You'll never be rid of any discoloration. That's again, that's the organics. It's not that you're producing and sending dirty water. That's not it at all. And so you will continue to see utilities flush water. Salem, Seymour, Clarksville. Drive down Jeff on 10th Street. Any given day on 10th Street, they're flushing a hydrant. You'll get the sidewall of your car blown out. They're flushing all the time, and that's what we do. You run into these pockets of these calls, and okay, well we must have an area that needs addressed. We'll get on it. And so consumption alone doesn't take care of it. Consumption alone never will. And again, the way our system lays and the way it loops around, we've got a lot of areas that are underutilized. And when something gets pushed or pulled, it'll break something loose. Now, part of that is with the older pipes and the older valves. And so the more we have a contractor come in, and I bet you can attest, Nathan, when you cut some of them old pipes, boy, they're boogers, aren't they? They just look gnarly.
Oh, yeah, we cut a piece out on if you remember, Ely Street, New Albany. It was stamped 1905. It sat on our counter for a while. You couldn't even see through it. It was a 1 foot section. You put a flashlight against it, and you couldn't see it. American Water changed that line the next year.
Yeah.
But we didn't know. We were plagued with breaks on that street, and we come in, put a band on. Finally, we cut a section out. Well, we seen why, 'cause it was full. It was just from 100 years of buildup.
And so we have a lot of old pipe, and 50, 60, 70 years old is the norm here in Salem. When we start a water project, they're old pipes, and they've done their job. That's not a cut against what's in the ground. They've done their job, and there's a shelf life. And that's important for all of us to know. It's not that we're anxious to go spend money. They have a shelf life.
Yeah.
And remedy is not always a Band-Aid or a clamp. You've got to end up replacing it at some point. Slip lining is not an option when you have old pipe. That was a question asked of me. No, guys, that's not what you do. You can't slip line something of that age and expect it to last. The integrity of the pipe's gone, and that's something that, quite frankly, I don't know that IDEM would even approve it.
It's
Borderline, okay.
very, but in pipe bursting in place, I've only seen it done one time. It didn't work great. Every fitting, you could have a city block, say pipe burst, you don't have to dig. And they say, okay, it's gonna be perfect, it's gonna save us so much money, but then there's 14 solid sleeves in there where the pipe burst won't go through a solid sleeve or mechanical joint. And you're still digging every hole up, and then you're at an impasse. It would have cost you as much just to relay it and have new pipe.
And then the security of knowing you've not missed something.
Yes.
You know, that's the
Well,
other.
To your point earlier, as far as the integrity of the pipe, and I know he's seen it, I've seen it multiple times, where what started out as a 1/4-inch thick wall steel pipe in 1930, I've seen it multiple times where you uncover it, and as soon as air hits it, it springs a leak and disintegrates. Once the dirt's not around it to hold it there, it's gone. There is no integrity left to that pipe. So
We can sometimes dig up a 6-inch cast iron. This should be, 8 inches round, and that might be a foot. And the electrolysis in the dirt just kind of naturally bonds to the metal and creates a crust about that thick. And you can have this, it could be a pin drop of water. And American Water has spent a lot of money and have people come in and do the sonar and everything, and they'll pinpoint, okay, here's a leak, and dig it up, and it's just a drop. And they found that drop. Well, as soon as we hit it with a hammer, we'll take a screwdriver to chip the stuff off of it, it will just explode, take 20 feet out. And so that one drop of water was one chip away from a big leak.
And so add to that, Nathan, we've uncovered several that the ground has eroded erode is not the right word. So your ground shifts and that pipe flexes.
Yep.
And so when the pipe went in, Judy could have had two blocks of new pipe. We have a leak today, and all of a sudden it's sitting on bedrock. And we know darn good and well it wasn't on bedrock when it was put in. But that pipe, it changes, does it not? And
It's always flexing. What we've seen is in a crack around ring break. In the summertime, the ground heaves and they split on top, and in the wintertime, the ground kind of settles and they heave and they crack, they start on the bottom. And just where the ground's always constantly moving.
which again, I'll ask, doesn't that then also play into as pipe shelf life dwindles, then that's more susceptible. As that ground flexes, it will constantly then look at weak spots and to find that to rupture.
You can Google what's the average life of 8-inch cast iron main, and I've always said 40 to 70 years. And if you Google right now, first spot says 50 to 100, the second spot says 40 to 50, the third spot says 50 to 65, and the fourth says 75 to 100. Your infrastructure's 60 to 70 years old. So no matter what, out of 4, you're still reaching the end of the life in your pipe. And that's in the cast iron. And to be honest, your cast iron is probably better than some of the PVC that was put in the late 70s and 80s. That pipe shelf life is really only 50 years. And if it was put in 75, we're here. We're at its shelf life now. I mean, maybe the stuff we're putting in now will last a true 100, but it won't.
No.
It might go 60. So we'll still have to keep replacing pipe every year.
Yeah.
Regardless.
Well, and so, that kind of leads into part of the discussion that has caused a lot of questions, and certainly they need answers. We do have a water line project that is teed up and is of need. We have 4,000 linear feet that is projected in a new project that certainly is old news. Greg, your wife was here, and Becky, George Browning was here that day. December 22nd of 22, all this was announced. We had a nice press conference. A lot of folks attended. Again, Becky White and George Browning covered it very well, and then we had a press release to follow it. These projects have been in the works for some time. And, appreciate everybody coming that day and understanding that, you know, the city has needs and the city should develop further expectations. And so, gosh, I don't know. Sally, you were here that day. Was it about an hour and a half? Hour anyways.
Oh, yes, it was.
Every bit of an hour. And we covered a lot. Covered a lot that day. But that was December 22nd of 22. So old news in the sense of, hey, we got things looming that we need to take care of. And so this is certainly something that's been in the works for some time. And getting priorities listed and figuring out, hey, this is a trunk line. This is well, it's aptly sits on Main Street. Well, it sits on Main Street because it serves a gross amount of people. And this 4,000 linear feet does feed the standpipe. This trunk line branches out. That is a distribution then that goes on to 135 South for East Washington. Then as the standpipe pushes water, that's the main line that feeds then New Pekin. So again, this is something that wasn't crafted quickly or anything that was discussed shortly. It was always been a discussion point and a lot of conversation and a lot of time knowing why we need to do this. 4,000 feet doesn't seem like a lot, but yet it is. 4,000 feet covers a lot of ground. Would you say, Nathan, in the scope of water projects, is that a average?
It's a substantial project. I mean, it's, you know, a lot of, you get in town, a block, 2 block is usually your problem areas. When you can do 4,000 feet at once, a lot of people don't want to spend the money to do it, or they've already replaced a block or 2 here, a block or 2 there. So, you know, if you have the chance and can replace 4,000 feet ahead of a road project or something, you might as well do it, because nobody cares what's buried. They cared about the outcome of the road project.
Well, and so you raise an interesting point, and that's part of these announcements on these message boards was, you know, this is again another federal highway grant that we've got. Again, Becky's covered it very well with LPC. I think we have a duty. You know, we have a road project that, gosh, it seemed a little bit necessity to look at what's under the ground before we pave a road. You know, that's due diligence. Goodness, we owe that to ourselves. We don't want a main corridor with pretty pavement, but a little bit of uncertainty underground. And at 70-plus-year-old pipe, boy, we need to really think this through.
What I have seen 9 times out of 10 in any town, and I'm going to use Jeffersonville and Gaunty as examples, you can do a streetscape and exclude the water because they're separate there. You've got a government, it's privately owned, and you've got a municipality. They don't do the water and they do the road, and everything's looking great and perfect and beautiful. And you know, the main, that 6-inch cast iron main was 4 foot deep. Nobody was ever around it, and you cut a foot of subgrade off. And then you need to do a little treatment, so now you're cutting another foot off. So now you've only got 2 feet of dirt on top of that water main. And then you take a 20,000-pound roller and turn vibrator on and make 1 pass. And I have fixed more leaks behind a roller in a subgrade treatment than probably more, just because as soon as it starts, it's going to pull all the weak places out of that water main. And then when we flood the road cut, because the main's broke, well, now the road's laying in, they can't do anything with the road for another week. So then you got contractors mad and went and paid liquidated damages for sitting idle for a week when they could have been working on the road. And then, we need to replace the water main. So now we're going to hold the road project up for another 3 weeks while we design an emergency basis. And then now the price we had, or we could have done it for, is now an emergency basis. So all the contractors have to move at emergency, so the rates are going to increase. It can't be scheduled work.
And And then you're scrambling.
you're scrambling, yeah. And so, when you can plan it and schedule it, you know what you're getting. When it's emergency basis, you're paying emergency fees. And all contractors are they have to do that because, they're pulling people from other places to send to work on something.
So very costly.
Very costly.
Very costly. And that's just the financial aspect because, again, not a crystal ball, and I certainly don't want anything. But, again, that's a trunk line that affects a lot of businesses, a lot of end users. And, I can tell you, I know a place down on South Main Street, and there's been a lot of leaks on that property. And it's amazing what that does when it does rupture. I mean, it's a booger to fix because of the amount of pressure. It's a booger to fix because it is the high traffic area just because of Main Street. It's just a tough one to fix.
Something I've seen, say the ones that live, so if you do one city block, the water doesn't rupture during construction and everything looks great and everybody loves it. And we've got new parking stalls and new sidewalk and some planters and got 70-year-old cast iron brakes on a Friday for Food Truck Friday or a festival or something. And now everybody's mad. They want to know why the water main wasn't replaced when the road was tore up. And why now there's a road patch here, and then in 6 months, why there's another road patch there, and then another road patch. And before you know it, in 3 years, you've got 6 more patches, and looks like quilt work. And then you have to pay, you could have went 7 to 10 years before milling and paving, and now you're milling and paving in 3 years, 4 years to get rid of all the patches because everybody's mad looking at the patchwork.
May I ask a question?
Please.
I know it's coming down Main Street, right?
Yes.
Now, has the pipes been replaced around the square?
Yes. Oh, goodness. Yes. You bet. Sorry. Thank you. I should add to that. So we did that due diligence. Let me back you up. Phase is easy to say, so I'll put it in those terms. Phase 1, stoplight at CVS and 56, stoplight to south gate of the square. That is aptly named Phase 1 in a lot of our discussions. Phase 1 did just what he's saying and what you're asking. We went in there first, well before the milestone award for the road work, and we did. We laid new line at the stoplight, and it came due south. It hugs the west side and stays in that lane of travel. We got to the north gate, and it does a split. As obviously we all know, there's water served all the way around the square, so it goes 2 directions at the north gate. Those were the trenches that kind of hugged the interior sidewalk. That's what that was. That was new water line. So it went all the way around the perimeter of the square. The loop, if you will, marries back up at the south gate and stays then on the west side as it leaves the south gate. So yes, new line, new services, all those customers were switched. That's done. Kudos to the crew. No, that's done.
I'll just help the gentleman, tell him about what people face or what cities face. Of course, being elected mayor, woman, I wanted to go out and see what these guys did. So I went out, whenever there's a water leak, I would say, I want to come, let me know, night or day. And we just paved this street. I don't even know what street it was at the time. Just had paved it, made it so nice, and had a water leak. And of course, I was there, but I held my temper. And when they dug it up, I said, okay, what are those, look like copper to me, not sure. What are those 5 things right there on this street? You just cover the street, 5. Well, that's where it has leaked. And I says, 5 times and you didn't replace the pipe underneath? So that's what you have. If you don't have someone with an engineer that would tell us what we really need to do, or someone professional. not just a mayor that didn't know all this. So how I handled the department, I said, well, this will not come out of the street department's budget, it will come out of your monies, you're gonna repay the street.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they knew by what I said to them, that if they had a water leak in the street, they would repair it.
And you raise an interesting point, and I have got similar phone calls. And when you get to a pit and you see a clamp, you just want to cringe. We've already been in here. We've already been in here. And from a business standpoint, Judy, goodness counsel, you take the price of a clamp, the price of deploying the employees, if it's after hours and it's overtime, you think, oh my gosh, so that clamp has got how much money tied to it?
Right.
What's a stick of pipe?
I asked them, I said, now how much did each plant cost? Of course, they could tell me, it was copper. And you can imagine what copper costs.
And you're spot on. And so the more of those we can get out of, and so your question about that, so yes, that, and I don't have that linear foot. Monty, do you recall from stoplight to South Gate? Goodness, probably 1,000,
I was going
1,500.
to say 1,800.
So probably shy of 2,000 linear feet. Yes, we got that in the ground. And that was a big help getting that done. That was not anything that was financed. We were very successful. Well, we weren't successful. Everybody, municipality, we used with the council's blessing, the ARP fund, and we said, okay, we're going to make these dollars really count. And we did. We funded that in-house. That's in the ground and it's working. It's energized. So that's some security. And so, yes, this proposed what we've got teed up is taking the south gate and going south. Absolutely. And again, it's a proactive. It's not reactive. It's in the construction world. It just makes sense.
Yeah, well, I mean, Spring Street and Silver Street down to New Albany, they had just remilled, paved, it's beautiful. Last pass, the steam was still coming off the asphalt. That road come across, I mean, it had been on there all day, but I mean, they were done. Asphalt's still steaming and the 10-inch main cracked. And when the water came up and they had to get through the asphalt, they heaved and it got underneath that fresh layer surface and floated the entire intersection. Matt got a $65,000 change order to come in the next day. They took Bobcats and just picked it up and repaved it again.
Yeah. Well, and that's I'm amazed some days at some of the years of abuse that line has, to your point, has even held up like it has. Ton of abuse over the years. So, anyway, so we've got some things there we want to share. Certainly Bo and Andre and Courtney have some insight on that. But, another thing I want to say real quick is that there is a difference. I do want to say this slightly before we move on. Take a minute. There's a difference between ratepayers and taxpayers. And that's another misnomer that seems to float around quite a bit. The utility is not tax funded. The utility has never been tax funded. Property taxes do not pay water, wastewater, storm sewer. Your utility is driven by ratepayers. Ratepayers through Indiana code pay the rates. Now, a taxpayer can be a ratepayer, but not every ratepayer is a taxpayer. And that's a very important distinction. I want everybody to think about that. So yes, if you turn on the faucet, you're going to pay for that consumption. That is what a ratepayer does. So anyways, there's a distinct label there, and you need to think about it. I want everybody to understand that's property taxes don't fund the utility. That's why the utility is separate. The utility operates the way it does. It is rate-based, not tax-based. So There were some questions then, well, that's going to raise our taxes. No. Gosh, we've been down this road 100 times. Any project that revolves around the utility does not raise your taxes. And that is a misnomer. I really wish we could kind of wrangle in, but okay, it probably is a common question here on out. Yes, your rates can fluctuate. Yes, rates do change, and rates cannot stay level. And I'm not advocating for raising rates. That's not what I mean by that. But we live in a world where I don't know anything else that stays level. You can't operate, you can't function, you can't pay wages, you can't maintain, you can't fund depreciation. There's nothing that is level in the world of finance, and especially with the utility. I think that's a pretty standard concept. There are variations, certainly. I'm not saying some rates are less, some rates are more. You bet. There's a whole gamut, and we don't always understand what comes in the mail either. You don't have a water bill that comes in the mail. You have a utility bill. On that utility bill, you have a water rate, you have a sewer rate, and you have a trash rate. Now, the city of Salem does not have a storm water utility. And I want to repeat that. The city of Salem does not have a storm water utility. Kind of unique, kind of odd. We fund those. We quite frankly take it on the chin. We are funding stormwater improvements without any revenue. Andre, Bo, is percent-wise, do 50% of your clients have stormwater utilities, 40%, plus or minus? I mean, we're not alone, but.
Yeah, Mayor, to answer your question, I think I've been in the industry for about 22 years. When I first came in, not many municipalities had stormwater fees to address stormwater issues that you're mandated to address when you're within MS4. But I think now majority of communities that are of a certain size do address stormwater through a stormwater fee. I know there were some issues back then, and Bo can speak to it from a legal standpoint, where stormwater fees taxes, but I think, based on that I guess trial or whatnot, did not produce that. So they are fees. It is a utility, just like the water and sewer, where it's supported by the users of those that utility. So one thing, Mayor, I'd like to jump in if I may. Monty spoke to that utilities, no matter, you can look at the 5 utilities and, from a water standpoint, in, these 3 counties, they're all different. They're all used differently. And so I know the big thing is, how do we compare it to, Corden or Scottsburg or whatnot? Those systems are very different. And the users on that system, when the system was put in. And so just at a high level, just looking at those rates and just saying, they're comparative. I know we put it out there because that's what the public wants to see, but there's so much involved in how that rate was determined. You're looking at those costs for that particular municipality, and then you're dividing it over the revenues, and that's how many customers are on there, what types of customers. You can have a large industrial-based, commercial, or residential. They're all going to use the system differently, and you're going to, and the rates should be price appropriate to the users on that system. So there's another level that you have to look at just beyond, just the rates themselves when you're comparing them across, 5 or 6 communities.
Right, certainly. And, they have certain needs that Salem doesn't, and quite frankly, vice versa.
Correct.
Yeah. And so, I bring that up because, a lot of people say, well, my water bill's X. Well, pardon me, wait a minute. Well, let's look at it. Are you sure the water bill is that, or is it your total utility bill? And so, again, the 3 components are the water, wastewater, and trash. Those make up the utility bill. And so it's not always a fair assumption or a fair label. Well, my water bill has went up. Well, no, there's a calculated rate that there's no change in it. It's based on consumption, so the rate is fixed until, this governing body, you council, that's a fixed rate. It's all consumption. So, and I will share, the wastewater component is more expensive. And guys, that's a different utility, different process, different pipe, and different certification. You have to treat wastewater in such a way, and there are things that drive that price. And yes, wastewater is typically, well, I won't say typically, Andre, Bo, is it always more, but typically?
I would say 90% of the community's sewage works for wastewater is more. It's just more corrosive. It eats at the equipment more. You have more regulation typically. So it's just going to, different employees with different certifications. It's just a lot more costly to operate and maintain a sewage works.
So, in saying that, when our total rate, it is a certain amount, but yes, the water is its own rate, its own label on the utility bill. And again, based on consumption, if you take half-hour showers, your neighbor takes 10-minute showers. Again, to Andre's point, to Monty's point, not necessarily all two households or any two households are going to have the same bill. And I hear that often. Well, I talk to my neighbor. Well, I don't know your neighbor's water habits, and how they do that, and what goes on in those private walls. So anyways, the consumption's there. And so, we know it. There's another thing. The council was very proactive, and Board of Works in another upgrade, and what we did, we replaced the water meters throughout the system. Truck even did a tour and come back with some valuable information and reported back, and we made a decision. We had water meters that couldn't even identify the manufacturer. I mean, they were just that old. We didn't know who made it. We funded it. That was not anything we borrowed. Salem was very adamant. She said, okay, we'll do this if we can make it work. And so she sat down and went through it, and we did. We put new water meters in. The technology is tremendous. Unit, your meter, and your consumption. We can track it yesterday, last week, last month. If you want a year's printout, this is what you did, Mr. Jones. This is where you turned the faucet on, and it has been invaluable data, and it's another upgrade. That is something that, and those meters started to fail, and Monty, Nathan, they fail, don't they?
I would say we get and see a lot of complaints in different counties, towns. Somebody calling, my water bill this, that, don't see the leak. My water bill is high, I want a new meter. My meter hasn't been touched in 10 years. You don't want a new meter. The customer doesn't, because they get slow as they get older, and especially the old mechanical ones. And then we go and put a new Census ultrasonic, picks up every single drop. Oh, now their bill's $10 higher a month now, that brand new meter. And I've told people, you don't want a new meter. As a customer, you don't, because it's going to catch it. And it'll catch you real fast. Now you're, because you wanted that new meter, just cost you $120 a year. And that's 120 for you times 1,000. Well, there's another 2% of your water loss. If you when you buy the meters, it's a big hit on the chin at one time to change them, but then you're cutting your water loss back now.
Yeah. And we did. You're right. We found several Crocs that had leaking meters.
And there
certainly did.
Some of those, all the meter distributors, their warranties vary for this or that. Some of them die or the batteries go dead in them, and you probably had some that were still mechanical that should have been physically read that were just never changed.
Yeah.
And if you've changed them all, now you're accounting for it.
Yeah. So to your point, so that data is there, and so we know that consumption, and again, that now we can tell if your neighbor's using more or using less. We certainly know, but those are all things to know. those are done. That that's part of your asset mapping. That's one of those boxes that they're in the ground, they're working, they're paid for, done. So Andre makes a good point. You know, compared to other utilities, you know, our size, our rates, our number of employees, what we pay. Know about or going into, and you've got natural attrition happening, retirement. These 25, 30-year-old employees, 25, 30-year employees with that municipality or utility, you know, they're reaching that retirement age, and it's a vacuum. I don't know on your side, but you've seen some of that, I'm sure, or heard of it.
Yeah, we were just talking about some guys, a lot of the guys I kind of grew up with, they're all retiring right now. They're 65, 66, 70, and it's hard to find young guys to take their place anymore.
And it's all part of that. What is your rate? What is your rate compromised of? And you know, that's one of those things. I would like to pay our operators more, but our rate binds us to a certain amount, and you know, we don't have that now. We do have the crew. I mean, we are fully staffed 24/7 as we're supposed to, but you know, we're wage poor in comparison to some of our neighbors. Anyway, so I want to go on to rate study, rate operations, costs. Andre, Courtney, Bo, that's kind of your wheelhouse. The utility has always had a increase of cost, albeit stair-stepped, somewhat gradual. It has always had, okay, now we need to fund a little more. We've got a little more expense. Talk about 2021 and how we come to that rate.
So you bring up a good point, Mayor. So inflation did start to take off, as we all know, after 2022. But even before that, you know, when you looked at the 2021 rate study, or the rates that are in effect now, they were phased in over 2 periods. In 2022, a little bit of a delay, but that usually when you do a rate study, you do try to project out what the other rate-funded capital needs that you need to do. That's like vehicles, trucks, valves, hydrants, meters, all of that. So you try to base that on the best plans you have, and then plus some, just to make sure you can kind of bridge the gap for, let's say, 3 to 5 years. But what that study did not take into account the significant increase in costs at all utilities across the state, the country, food prices, whatever, water, Evansville, East Chicago, all over the state. It costs more to treat a gallon of water. Yep. I've never done the calculation, but usually when I'm looking at certain chemical costs or other maintenance costs, and there's also some different requirements with IDEM between groundwater and surface water. It usually costs a little bit more. There was a big increase in cost after that. I think I paid $3.70 for a gallon of gas yesterday, but it just did not take that into account. Your rates must be just, fair, and equitable, and Bo can get into that. Rates must be sufficient to operate the utility on a day-to-day basis. So if you look at your operating costs, you can start to reduce things and try to shift stuff as much as you can, but really you're just chasing pennies. You really need to adjust to this is a new reality. And sometimes that, even if the best planners, you just never see that. So right now, you know, whether it's sewer or water, we're definitely seeing that across the country, that everyone's looking at rate adjustments, capital improvement needs. You know, the guys were talking about, you know, the grading of the workforce. You know, I have clients that are big clients, they're having to pay more, and then it's almost like police and fire. Once they get a skill set, because there's such a need, you're chasing, you know, trying to retain and keep people. So you're starting to have to pay a little bit more in wages and benefits. Those are going up. So, you know, some of your drivers, you know, are common to what I was seeing from the time you did the rate study, which was based on a year before, you know, the calendar year of expenses, we projected out the inflation that we saw. And all inflation does is just reset the price. Even though inflation is slow, you still have higher prices anyway. So and you have to operate the utility in a just and sound manner. So we're seeing that across the state. We saw it quicker in sewer than we did in water, but water is now starting to catch up as far as the amount of rate increases and the impact of those. And so, yeah, it's not, you're not different than other communities that we're seeing all across the state. And there's a more emphasis about it with the regulators and the state itself as are the utilities keeping up with operating and maintaining. So the asset management plan you spoke about, the state requiring you to do that, to look at financing, to get favorable financing. You don't have to look at asset management. They want to know you can operate and maintain, and you're looking to as we know, that takes a little bit of time to get everybody, you know, what they need to do. So
It says here, excuse me,
Yeah.
that we're anticipating almost a 3% drop in population in the next 20 years. How will that affect us in that regard?
yeah, so I was just talking about nuts and bolts. So you start to add layers of more efficient facilities, but you still have the same assets. So, you know, showers or washing machines, whatever it may be, they use less water, but you still have the same infrastructure you have to maintain to be able to provide service. And then you have, you know, it's just everything costs more. But when you have a reduction in, again, it's the same thing. You have a reduction in your customer base. Look at Gary, you know, I actually work for here. But when you lose population, you still have to maintain. So it's just you're spreading the cost across less people, which means you're going to have a higher Indiana, more rural. You're seeing less population. But then on the flip side of that, in the growth areas around Indianapolis, or even, you know, people are flying out of Chicago to northern Indiana. You're seeing, well, now we have to provide service for all these people. Now you have a lot of growth. And so you're seeing rate increases there or some other fee increasing. So it's like either way you go, there is an impact that you must address, or at least start to anticipate that happening.
And that's an interesting stat, Steve. You know, there's a lot of discussion amongst mayors and colleagues. You know, what do you do to subside decline? You know, the main objective is, you know, you want to maintain population. Certainly, there's several facets to that, and birth rate is one of them. And you know, migration being the second part. And to Andre's point, are thinking, okay, we probably can't intervene with the birth rate, but we might be able to step into the area of growth. And so, you know, what are you doing to attract, possibly to hedge against that negative flow and maintain your population, let alone, you know, could you grow it 2%? You know, possibly. And so, but those are things that are going to happen. You're right. As the next 5, 10, 12 years, there's a lot of interesting thoughts about population in the rural area. And so we still have that obligation to all the consumers that are still here. And so that utility has to function. Public health, you know, it has to function all the way around. So Bo, Courtney, Andre, whoever, you know, we look at things and, okay, cost of doing business. Utility does have a cost of doing business component. And so when the discussion was, we're going to find a way last 18 months ago now, you know, we're going to try our best to find ways to finance this. You know, there was only so much ARP dollars. That those dollars were based on population through the federal government. We got our share of ARP. That was not near what others received, and it was a one-time shot. So that money's gone. And so USDA is who financed the treatment plant. You know, that was a long process. We looked at that as the city administration, the elected officials, how are we going to tackle this? And USDA said, well, point blank back in those days, Danny, Truck, you speak up. Steve, you were there too, pardon me. Your rates, you don't have enough rate. And so they would not fund any of it. So we did get a USDA loan. And so I will tell you, and I would say with him here or not here, if it wasn't for Trey Hollingsworth pushing that through Washington when he was up there, he was a very big advocate for the city of Salem and Washington County. And so we had a good connection to the federal folks. We got our, pardon me, not even 2%. Sally, 1.8?
1.75.
Not even. And so you talk about a real win in that type of project and what it would have been on the open market even back then. We couldn't have touched the 1.78.
Might have been less than that. I have to think now.
1.25.
1.25. That's right. That didn't sound right. Yeah.
Even cheaper. I'd forgot. Okay, I thought it was 1.7 myself. 1.25.
Yes.
1.25. So that was, again, a huge win. We've got that. There are some obligations to USDA, certainly language that the administration signed on to, and we have a commitment. We have to fund our utility in such a way, guys. Speak on that. How we have a financial commitment or contractual agreement.
Yes, so anytime you take out a loan or a bond issue to finance improvements, you basically, you know, approving a bond ordinance or, you know, to be able to issue the debt. And then there's typically some financing or loan agreement with you and the bondholder. So typically there's a couple of documents. One, the bond ordinance allows, you know, statutory authority for the, you know, the authorizing body to issue the debt. And then there's typically another agreement between you and the bondholder, whether that's SRF, the Indiana Finance Authority, or USDA. And so to do that project, you know, their typical loan terms are about 40 years. And that's, at the time, that was a really good interest rate, 1.25. So that allows you to do, you know, over 10 million, you know, heading towards $20 million of projects. And that loan term is over 40 years. And so I'll get a little bit nerdy here with everybody, excuse this, but when you do a long-term project, a treatment plant is a long-term project. It's gonna last more than 1 year, it's gonna last typically more than 20 years. It's probably gonna be closer to 40 or 50 years. Now, you may have to do certain improvements on the way, but that big structure, or, some of the bigger pieces are gonna last a long time. So you match up that payment structure, so the revenues you're bringing in, that payment, from your ratepayers is matching the expense of that, financing that improvement. From an accounting standpoint, that's kind of matching revenues with expenses because of the useful life of that asset is over that long period of time. So the loan documents you had with the USDA is like, we believe that is a valid project. We want to finance that at this lower interest rate, and then you'll make those payments over a long term. It's different than credit card debt.
Mhm.
It's different than consumer debt. You're providing a service to ratepayers, and all those ratepayers along the line that connect in and use that system over the useful life of that asset are all paying their fair share. I hate using fair sometimes, but that's really what you are, because your rates must be just, fair, and equitable. You're charging the appropriate rate for all those ratepayers along, that are using that. So please forgive me for getting down in the weeds a little bit, but that's standard mechanism for utilities across the country, and especially in Indiana, to get, a reduced rate, because even in 2021, the market rates are 4, 3 and 3.75, 4. So you got a, significantly reduced interest rate to make significant improvements to your system, and then you finance it over the life of that asset. I can only think of a few utilities, less than 5, that potentially cash flow it, and they're in the donut communities that have a lot of growth, and they have rates that are pretty similar, but they've just been able to. So most utilities have to finance, all of them finance, even the ones I'm thinking of that Courtney and I work with. They still finance projects because it makes economic sense to finance it over the life of that asset. So.
Well, and to that point, Steve, I don't recall if you went with us the particular day at the old treatment plant. I can't remember, Danny, if you did. But Truck, Sally went, that's right. When you talk about life of an asset, that treatment plant was shot. And I again, this is not a gloom and doom statement. It was amazing that it was still functioning. Monty didn't get to see it, but I'm sure in your travels, you've seen operations that you just scratch your head. How is this thing producing water?
Remember the hole in the floor? Sally wouldn't walk across it. She said, "You go ahead, you're bigger than I am." And it holds you all over.
It was a asset that had depreciated out. And so to your point, it was time. It might have pumped water another 2 years, 5 years. None of us in the Senate administration felt comfortable. And so now the old plant, 40, 50, so say it was 60 years old.
Yeah, it was 60 years.
It was 60 years old. And that's, again, that was a 24-hour a day, 7-day a week plant. So you think about 60 years of average of what, Monty? 1,000 gallons a minute?
Yeah, at a minimum.
At a minimum, 1,000 gallons a minute over 60 years.
Don't ask me to do that math in my head.
Just gross amount of use. I mean, the place was shot. And so it did its job. And so you're right. You take this approach. Okay, we need to finance this in an appropriate way because we know the next one. Again, you maintain it, you take care of it, and you go through the proper procedures. You should get another 50 to 60 years. And so we've got it financed less than what the shelf life should be. Certainly go through those motions. And so that was a good structured amount of money.
If you'll remember, Mayor, they wanted to come down here and do a patchwork to it.
Yeah.
And I was on the committee.
Yeah.
They said, now for $1.5 million, we'll do this. But now for $3 million, we'll do this. Or for $7 million, we'll do this. Justin and I said, how much is a new plant? And it wasn't but $3 million more dollars, so.
Yep.
It didn't make sense not to build a new plant.
Yeah, and the unknowns would still be there.
Oh, yeah.
Certainly. And so we did that, but we felt good, we still feel good about it. And so moving on, yes, so when we talk about financing utility debt, that Andre, Bo, Courtney, I mean, that is a common practice because of the life of the asset. You're not going to bond council to buy a dump truck. You're going to bond council because this is a huge improvement to your infrastructure. This is a long-lasting, large number serving project.
Correct. That's correct. I mean, typically, if you think about trying to cash flow a project of that size, one, you'll be chasing inflation. And then we all know $1 today is worth more than $1 tomorrow. And so, you're kind of, it may take you 20 years to save up enough money to be able to cash flow that. And that's with nothing else breaking or no other cost increases or anything like that. So all along the way, you're going to have to raise rates, or you raise rates to a significant amount in a short period of time. And again, it's a tough decision because it just takes so long to generate so much of that cash in a short amount of time. And then what you're doing is you're essentially having all your current customers pay for that asset and not the ones that are going to use it later. So the ones that are coming in later, they're getting a break, and everybody now is taking the hit.
Now say that again, that's an interesting concept. If you pay for it out of pocket, you're in essence saying only today, everybody's paying for it. And then future users are getting a coupon, if you will, a handout. That's an interesting, that's very interesting.
What would happen is you no longer have, like, you've saved up the money and now you don't need the rates to be as high. Now you have to, because just fair and equitable has to be cost-based. You no longer have that cost unless you can justify it with something else. And now you basically lower rates, and then everybody in the future is basically getting a break.
Mhm.
Or, basically it's free to them when essentially they're using the asset. So it's kind of like you have some inequities and who's sharing the costs. So.
Yeah, and again, so again, utility based by consumption, and so those users, water, wastewater, they're getting quite a break.
Yeah, and one thing on like rates, so your rate covenant with USDA, they require 1x coverage. So your debt operations maintenance needs to basically, at a minimum, match up with your revenue. If it doesn't, you're in breach of that. The state revolving fund, again, another governmental purchaser, low rates, they usually require 125 coverage, so 125%. As would any bank, if you sold it to a bank too, they probably want more than that. But just to give you an idea of like rate covenants and what USDA requires now, what SRF looks for and what banks look for.
That's correct.
Justin, could I make, and I'm not trying to step on them guys' toes, but this is kind of in reference to several of the comments they've made here lately. I have said this and had this conversation with numerous municipalities over the years, but this plays into Andre's comments about the communities that he sees that can fund, self-fund projects. For a century now, for a variety of reasons, municipal utilities have had the idea, inappropriately, but they've had the idea that they're not in business to make a profit. If you look at all your other utilities, your electric, your phone, your gas, even your private water utilities, they are on a set schedule every 2 years, every 3 years, et cetera, that they do rate cases. And the reason for that is about 40 to 50 years ago, they came up with a plan that here is our cost to maintain our system and improve it. And by maintain, it means not only maintaining what you have, but replacing aged infrastructure. And here is a set profit margin that we want to make on top of our cost. And every cycle, they have the rate increases to keep that margin. Once you get a water utility, start getting that mindset, it's going to take, to Andre's comment, yes, you can get to where you're self-funded. It's going to take several years down the road to build up those surpluses to get there once you get to that mindset. But that is a huge difference that I've seen for years between municipal utilities and private utilities, is just private utilities that functioned on, well, we have X amount of dollars, so that means we can't do this maintenance and replacement to our system, which gets us to a point where you can't kick the can any further down the road and you have to come up with an answer, versus saying, no, this is the amount of money it takes to maintain the way we should for our residents. And based on that, here's what our rate needs to be every 2 years looking forward at it. Utilities, municipal utilities are kind of like playing catch up to private utilities on that. They got 40, 50 years ahead of us on that mindset. And that's plays a big factor in self-funding versus not self-funding projects.
Well, and you know, okay, and just the simple things, stick a pipe, you know, one section of pipe, you know, and how many of those do you keep on a shelf? How many hydrants do you keep on a shelf? You know, think those discussions, and then it becomes, well, we don't have enough money. We're going to have to wait another 2 months. Then we'll buy some hydrants to put on a shelf in case we need one. And so then you start picking and choosing what you're doing. And we've seen that. You know, there's been times where we would have liked to have bought something now, but we're going to have to wait a little bit.
And to Andre's comment, that is one of the big reasons behind the AMPs that they're requiring now, is because
asset
management plan, sorry, creature of habit, is because municipal utilities have that history of being neglected for years. And this is one of the tools that they're saying, hey, we don't mind helping you out, but we have to ensure you're doing your own fair and equitable maintenance of your system to all your residents. So I think we're going to see more of that coming, more aggressive rules along those lines coming as we go. But that was a tool to say, hey, we're going to help those that help themselves. If you're not doing nothing, then you're out of luck.
Are you exercising those valves and recording them? You know, that's exactly what he's speaking to. And you've got to document it, and you've got to be able to show it in that AMP, that asset management plan. And we've done a good job of writing that and having it. So, you know, we talked about USDA. There's also other funding mechanisms, OCRA and EDA, Economic Development Agency, out of the federal government side, out of the Chicago district. Guys, those are all very similar in what they do in utility work, but they also have a very similar stance. And Andre and Bo can speak to this, even Monty, you know, to that. What are you doing to help yourself? And that was the reason in 2016, USDA said your rate's too low. You're not, and this is an over-encompassing statement, but what they're saying is you need to invest more yourself. If you had an appropriate rate schedule for what you're wanting to tackle, you might have been, and I'll underline the word might, no guarantee, you might have been more poised to see some grant dollars. And so as we navigate, fast forward 2017, 2018, here we are 2024, we're in the same boat. You know, the Indiana director of USDA has been in my office, you know, and so, you know, that's his exact words. Love to help you, Salem. We've got all the applications for loans you want, but your rate is such, no, we don't have a grant qualification for your type project. EDA is even worse. Again, we're out of the Chicago district. When you look at the amount of area that covers from federal dollar grant, now this is before the BIL, Biden infrastructure, the Build Back America money. That's even before that. You know, the Chicago district of EDA, you know, it is a unbelievable process. River Hills helped us with that. Bo can speak to that. Well, even Baker Tilly got involved with that process when we were looking at EDA dollars, and we could not make the mark for EDA grants. And that's extremely competitive.
Yeah, there's also, and you work on grant applications more than I do. There's income-based levels that can disqualify you from grants. I'm going to use Charlestown as an example. They've applied for everything under the sun from USDA and SRF, and they couldn't get grants for their utility projects. But.
Yeah, Okra is very competitive. You know, they have 2 rounds, spring and fall, and it is just extremely competitive. And oftentimes it doesn't really match up when you need to be able to do the project. I think, you know, the IFA came in with a reduced, you know, a subsidized or 2% interest rate, which is everybody, and I mean everybody. Monty can speak to the Bowen is looking for that 2% money at 1.25, 2%. But, you know, I think I mentioned this when I was here before, you know, the current market rates are like 5-6%.
Yeah.
You know, especially when you're looking at, like, if you need to go to the open market and like your, you know, Bank of America or JP Morgan is buying the debt, they're going to look for a lot of restrictive covenants and a bunch of other stuff. And then going through a bond rating, one that's going to cost you more to go through a bond rating, then going through the IFA or USDA. And then you may get a BBB plus, you're at 6%, and now the delta between the 2% and the 4% and the 6%, you know, I think we ran the numbers. I mean, you're almost paying for the project like twice. Mm-hmm. So again, you know, when you do get into that 2% money, it's just how competitive the grants are. You know, whether you agree with it or not, BIL did provide the IFA additional dollars to do projects like this and to subsidize the rate even more, 2%. You could have went through the pool, and that could be 4%. You know, and so through the IFA. So again, I think grants are so competitive because everybody has needs. Everybody needs to do projects. Everybody has infrastructure that's 60 to 100 years old. And like the mayor said, the higher your rates, or the poorer you are, or you're in a, you know, qualified census tract, those are where the grant dollars go. And that's the federal government is directing those dollars to go into the poorest of the poor, or when you have excessively high rates.
In other words, an entitlement city, and we are not. We're not an entitlement city, and you're right. So, and that's why I referred to BIL. So when the BIL money came available and was then transferred to each state, yes, the IFA was what we're saying, Indiana Finance Authority. Then they were the recipient. Okay, then we dole out these BIL dollars to the federal government, and so that again, application process. Where do you rank? How do you score? And so there was a lot of work you have to do to get ready to even see. And to Andre's point, we didn't score as much as our competitors, municipalities who did receive some grant dollars. But we were very blessed because that was even skewed further to be offered the 2% loan or 2% funding. You know, that was a big testament to the city of Salem. It's a big testament to us getting our work done and still getting that offer. Now, 2% is still 2%, but it's not 6%. And I you know, a proactive way of saying 2% is a lot cheaper to do. 2% is a lot easier as cost of doing business. very proactive in that sense. And so, you know, those hurdles, those obstacles, we have to stay competitive. And one of those is just that, you know, we've discussed for years, we do need maybe a CPI level of thinking on our rates. And, you know, we should visit as much as we can. And the Baker Tillys of the world, the attorneys of the world, you know, we can only correct so much, but we still need to be proactive. And right now we've got a 2% offer. And so that's the discussion at that point. It has a time. And I think if we do, this is not a discussion. Obviously, we're not doing anything tonight, but it will be probably offered to us if we want to go back at a higher. It won't stay. It does have a quarterly adjustment. Andre, what, 2.25 by chance?
You know, if the rates do go into, again, and I can't predict the future. I wish I could, but I can't. You know, we've seen the trends where they do a matrix rate. So it's based on your average 4,000 gallon bill. Again, that's where
Yes.
the rates come into effect. And then the MHI for the last census. And so, and then the need of the project, and then they're going to re-rank you by everybody else. That is, you know, they're getting so many, I forget how many applications they get on the water side, maybe 100, 200. And so you're going to be fighting again in that pool to see if you can get those subsidized dollars. And so we haven't seen a big creep up yet, but we all know this is an election year. And so the market starts to do crazy things in an election year. So, you know, no one could know what September, October look like, even if they score and rank you. So you're kind of in that position. But again, it's continuing having conversations with the IFA around the need of this project, and then the fact that it's NDOT related as well, they help. But again, NDOT's doing a lot of projects all over the state too. So. And
they are no different. They are running cost overages. That's a big discussion within the state. NDOT has got so many things that have got DES numbers programmed, and they're over budget. And so they're looking at, okay, do we go to the next fiscal year, which they're what, July to June?
Yeah,
maybe.
State fiscal years, yeah.
And so they're looking at adjusting some of their own work schedules, and because they're not immune either to the 30%. And so, you know, we've got costs. We're doing cost of doing business. We've got a lot of things that, you know, have to go into some of these prerequisites. I want to call them, you know, PERs, pre-engineering reports, financial studies, the attorney prep work. Guys, that's been asked of me more than once. You know, it seems like we're teeing up some things, but why are you spending the extra? Well, those are requirements. Those cannot be authored in